Hey guys, and welcome to the Hobby News. Alright, so we got some Sunday previews to take a look at from old GW and a few, tasty new treats, I guess, for later in the year. Looking pretty cool. So we'll start with the preview though, because, we've got some interesting stuff here as well. We've been through most of this, but this should be coming out for pre-order, I think, next week. So we'll come and take a look. We've got Kill Team to start with, and their Soul Shackle box. We looked at this, I think it was, either couple of weeks ago or last week, whenever it was. But we got the two sides, the Arbites and the Dark Elder there. And it's going to be a good box, I think, for people that are into 40k and want to play the Kill Team stuff. This is pretty good. You've got a bunch of terrain in there. Again, like usual for people that live in Australia, this part of the world, or New Zealand, the price on these boxes is probably going to be through the roof. So, you probably want to wait for some of these teams to come out individually if you like some of them, or share a box with someone. That's generally how it works, right? And then you split it up, because getting it, wholesale is pretty crazy in terms of price, unless you're really into both sides, right? Often with these boxes, you end up kind of liking one and not so much the other. It can be tricky sometimes. But if you're in other parts of the world where this is a little bit more affordable, then cool, right? It's still a fun idea. It's got that very much Necromunda feel, tight spaces, etc. Moving through little rooms and that kind of thing. Pretty cool. So we've got those two coming with the box, and then now they're bringing out some of the other I think Kill Team boxes that were from other big boxes like that. So we've got the Kazakin here, which we've looked at before, and the Kroot, and now they're coming out individually. So pretty nice that's happening. For most of these, they do that. There's been the odd few for some of these kinds of sub games where the team hasn't come out as a separate box, I'm pretty sure, but most of the time it does. So if you can't afford the big box, you just only have to wait a short time, and then they'll usually bring it out as a separate kit, which is nice, so that you don't have to get carried away with the FOMO and just buy the big box for the sake of it at the time. You can wait a little longer and then pick up the one that you actually want. So that's nice when they do that. Sometimes they don't, but most of the time they do. And here we've got the Kroot separate if you like those. So pretty good. And then we've got these the Navy breaches that we've seen before, again coming out separately, which is nice. I'm pretty sure that's what all this means. It's interesting that the descriptions don't actually say it exactly, but I'm assuming that's what this means, that they're showing it that it's coming out separately. Most of the time that's what it means. We've seen all these before, but good times that they're coming out individually, and then the Necrons as well. For those that like a little bit of, undead animated fun in the 41st millennium. So pretty cool. And then we've got the this, I think it's just the terrain pack, right? The Gallo Dark. This is just all terrain in here, I thought. Let me just see. Let's see what it says. So build your very own Gallo Dark board with 54 pieces of terrain. So this is the box with just the terrain. I don't know that it comes with... No, I don't think it comes with the two teams. But pretty cool, right? If you're into it. And then we've got more terrain here as well for that. So little accessories, bits and pieces, all those sorts of things. Now, incidentally, if you're into 3D printing, for Kill Team at least, there's a lot of people out there doing additional third-party sort of add-ons and things for these type of terrain kits, which is really interesting and fits in really well. This goes alongside things like Necromunda terrain and so on. You can find a lot of third-party vendors out there that produce a bunch of terrain pieces which are really easy to print and so on to add to this, which would be really fun, if you had like one box of this plus a whole bunch of 3D printed terrain. You could make some really interesting boards, not just for Kill Team, but for 40k generally. Again, Necromunda, you could do some really interesting things. And if you have a look on Instagram, you'll find tons of people out there that are doing that sort of thing, combining a lot of these plastic kits with 3D printing and so on to create some really interesting boards and dioramas and so on. Really cool stuff. It's one of those things that I noticed first when I came back to the hobby, a few years ago now. But back in the day, I was there for the golden time, the olden days, and these type of kits and all the terrain and so on, all the accessories, they just weren't around back then. A little bit, but not much. And so that's the first thing you sort of notice when you come back in, is just the plethora of options and just the amount amount of it that's around, not just from GW, but just from the community itself that's now generated it due to 3D printing and the ease of 3D sculpting and so on with digital software. It's really opened up this wide world of creative options and ideas that are just everywhere now, and it's amazing. It's sort of overloads the senses a little bit. Even just walking into the GW store back then when I first walked in, that even was almost too much for me when I first walked in, because of just the amount that's there. People don't really, I guess, young people now getting into it, or people that are new getting into it now, don't really know what it was like. If you didn't make it out of foam and, card and foam core and things like that, you didn't have a board. There was nothing, you had to make it all from, Pringle boxes and, whatever you had available to you, old TVs and packaging foam and all that sort of thing. That was how terrain was made, in the really, really early days. And if you're really good at it, you could make some really beautiful stuff. But, generally speaking, it was just made from whatever you had at hand. And now you have all of this. It's an interesting, progression and evolution for the hobby generally, for GW anyway, specifically. So yeah, pretty cool. So yeah, let's move on. So we've got the books as well, as usual, the mountain of books that you'll need, but still cool, that's all good. And then we've got the dice for those that like theme dice. You've got the different sides and so on, which is nice. And then all these bases. And again, for this, obviously there are a ton of 3D printing options out there for bases for this type of industrial type look. So you've got your choices basically, whether you like the GW ones or third party. There's so much out there to choose to get you into this and do those fun projects, right? So yeah, that's pretty cool. And then we've got Into Warcry, the new set. So we've looked at this before. This is definitely a winner. It's amazing. The vampires and the Khorne warband in here are awesome. And anyone that I'm pretty sure there's one of those few boxes where you'll like both sides. But it shouldn't be hard to find someone to split it with. If you want one and not the other. It's a pretty amazing kit, and bodes well for Warcry in the future. But specifically for me anyway, the vampires are really interesting, because I'd love to see what else they bring out in the future. And obviously Soulblight are coming with their new book for 3rd edition for AOS, and it'll be interesting to see what sort of developments go on. Are they going to do more of this sort of monkish sort of thing, or are they going down different roads? We don't know yet, but it should be really interesting to see what further developments come for Undead. But yeah, this is a great box. And then we've got the individual ones. So again, if you really want one of these and don't want to buy the big box, as you can see, they eventually do bring them out individually. So we've got the Seraphon one. Again, a really nice kit, very characterful for those that love lizard men. A theme we're going to go into in a second, with another article. But this is great, right? They're all really, really cool. And then this really interesting Tzeentch one, which, definitely moves in a different direction design-wise. It's not the usual Warhammer fare here. There's a lot of elements in this. I've talked about that before, but there's a lot of interesting stuff happening within these designs, which is a little bit, not quite usual for Warhammer. And a great addition. It just adds a little bit of different flair in there and allows them to use that as a stepping off point for other designs later down the track if they want to go that way. Really, really cool. And then we've got some Horus Heresy. So we've got these jet bikes, what they call this Sky Hunter Squadron. Horus Heresy is great. It's very evocative. It's that whole, historical element to 40k. It reminds me of those early days of Rogue Trader, all of the Beaky Boy helmets, which are my favorite. They're the best. Mark 6 is the best, armor type, just in case you're wondering. And, it always brings you back to those early days for those of us that were around for that time. Good fun. You've got all the accessory upgrade kits and so on. And then we come into White Dwarf and then Lord of the Rings. I was around for when this was released. And cool. It's nice that they still try to bring out some of the earlier models, some of the earlier designs for people to get into that, plus newer ones, etc. I was around for all of this, including this little Gimli model here. That's great. And then we've got looks like some more events for America, which is nice if you're in that part of the world. And then that's it. All right, so let's move on, and we'll go on to what I just hinted at before, which is some new Lizardmen stuff, or Seraphon models, and this one's pretty cool. So we've got I guess a battle standard bearer, something along those lines, which is really interesting. And it even shows you some rules, so that's kind of cool. And it should be fun. Like if this is the sort of the standard that's going along with the new Seraphon line, as what we've seen previously from the last news vid from the weekend. Seraphon are looking like they're going to be getting a lot of great new designs. It's hinted at that this is meant to be like a very large refresh with many models, bigger than the usual kind of refresh that they do. So we should be seeing quite a lot, coming out for Seraphon. So that's really interesting and cool for the game as well. Good for AOS, and it's a good standard, so that other factions may get a similar level of attention to build on the game and get it maturing. We're looking at like the sort of moving into the middle years of AOS sort of thing. Not really, but sort of moving on from its early days to something more mature, and that means slightly bigger ranges, more options for the factions, etc., and a bigger development in the game itself and the tactics and so on that you can employ per faction, which is really nice. So this is a good stepping point, and if it goes well, obviously they'll continue with those sorts of things, and we'll get more of that type of refresh in other factions. So it should be good. It's a positive move, and Seraphon players should be really happy with it. So let's take a look. So this is the model. So really cool idea, right? We've actually got like a live element here, so this sort of ball of energy that's going on inside the banner, which is kind of new. I don't think Seraphon designs have ever had anything sort of like this, a real active, almost technological element to their design before, but they're definitely leaning on that sort of space lizard kind of element to their history and their lore, and sort of bringing it forward into the designs, because it was always there, but in the background more in the early Lizardman models. It wasn't really a very active part of the design, but now we're seeing it. So that's a really interesting move for design wise for them, and adds a little bit more interest for the sculptors to do some fun effects and fun elements, like the sort of the lightning and so on, and with the plastic technology allows for things like this. Very, very fine sort of elements and so on. So that's really cool. And we've got like a really interesting headdress here. Again, moving into that sort of slightly sci-fi element. So we've got some sort of, ringed sections, but it's not all sort of ancient looking. We've got these sort of like nodes or gemstones in here. Really nice little, balance of the new and the old together, with almost sort of Necron-like elements in these circles and lines, which is, the hint that there's a connection between Necrons and Lizardmen. Even if the two worlds are separate, there's always been that sort of implied connection, and it's nice to get a little bit of that into the design, even if they don't explicitly say it. It's nice that it's implied. It's actually better that way, because it allows the fans to sort of dream of those connections and work them into their converting and their hobby generally, right? Which is one of the fun elements of miniature hobby is exploring some of those ideas and coming up with your own answers to them, right? You don't want to be told everything, about your own hobby. You want to be able to explore and create your own kind of narrative and lore around your little minis and so on for your games, right? So that's great. So a really nice mini. And then we've got the back view here. That it's just cool, like the way they've developed the Saurus here. I didn't talk about previously in the last news. Sorry, I had to cut short that news vid. But the new Saurus are a great development from the old one. It's got if we have a look, we've got more animation here. There's a bit more depth to the anatomy. Just more interest, more areas for you to paint and do something fun. The faces are more not necessarily more serious, but a more developed anatomical structure to the original, right? It's less sort of lizard in your home fish tank and more sort of dinosaur evolved into something humanoid, something a little bit more developed. And I think that's a good move and a good direction for them. So yeah, ultimately the new lizard designs are definitely moving in the right direction, and it's going to give it a much more evocative look overall once you get them all together. And that'll be a really interesting thing to see once they release that book and you showcase the full range. It's going to be really interesting to see just what this looks like. It's going to be very dynamic, a very vibrant color spectrum. Obviously I love blue-green, so this is the correct choice. Countered with those nice magenta reds, it's going to look really amazing, and all of the golds and everything they're using here are great as well. So you've got a really good color palette and a really interesting new direction for them. And I think for Seraphon players, this is exactly what they want, right? I can't imagine a Seraphon player not liking what they're seeing in front of them right now. And even old school Lizardman players from the fantasy days would be very happy with these. Ultimately this is a big win. And then we've got the rules. So for the rules, for those that are interested, it's a good banner. It's going to give you +1 to cast, right? So add 1 to casting rolls for friendly Seraphon wizards within 12 of any friendly units with this ability. In addition, add 6 to the range of any spells. Yeah, so this is a good ability depending on how many points the banner bearer is. But I can definitely see this as a nice little tech piece for some builds, and also gives a 6-up ward for friendly Seraphon units wholly within 12. So you've got a good range of abilities. I was even thinking of sort of allying in, because it doesn't say it doesn't have sort of like a sub faction. It's just got Seraphon wizard. So you could maybe ally a Seraphon wizard with this banner, in let's say another order faction to maybe benefit from a +1 to cast if there was a particular spell that was really good in the new book or something like that. I can see some little sort of sideline tech builds using this type of thing, because it is only just saying Seraphon wizard. So that does mean that you should be able to ally it in and get the benefits from this if you're also allying in a Seraphon wizard alongside this banner. Again, depending on points, but that could be interesting, right? A nice little bit of list building variety there. Because a lot of order armies use Slans a lot in their builds, just as Seraphon builds often use a prime, for certain types of builds as well from the Stormcast range. So there's a lot of cross-pollination going on between some of the order factions. So I can see some interesting builds coming from this new book. But yeah, let's move on. So really good stuff from the Seraphon, and we're finally going to take a look at something that's close to my heart. I've always loved them. We're looking at some Halflings for Blood Bowl. So we've got a couple of star players here, which are really interesting. I mean, what's not to love? Just fat little hobbit-like Halflings with their food, their hot pot and their subway roll, and just enjoying life, right? They're always great. I mean, these are just some really beautiful little minis. You can't really go wrong with Halflings. The big feet, all that sort of thing, the characterful nature of them. They're always fun and a joy to paint. I've been really tempted to do some Halflings myself. I've got an undead team, but yeah, definitely Halflings was something that I was always interested in. I had the old the hot pot throw or whatever you had for fantasy. That was always really cool. They're just great. I mean, it'd be amazing to see, a full Halfling army in Warhammer, right? That's always the dream. But I know other game systems actually do have Halflings for their fantasy type games that exists. I think is it Malfo or whatever? I don't know. Anyway, one of them has a Halfling army. I've seen it, but it'd be great to see GW's take on their on their sort of faction of it and see what they come up with, because these are always fun. Blood Bowl's a great game, and Halflings are awesome. So I'm going to leave you on that. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please hit that like button, subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I guess I'll catch you on the next one.